All right, everybody, we're back. And we're back. Now we're with Jerry Slutzky. We've met before.
Yes.
And estate planning. And, I mean, that's a crazy one. Because to me, it's the scariest thing of all because it has to deal with everything that I own and what my kids will get if I want them to get it, right?
Well, it shouldn't be scary, though, because when you think about it, none of us get out alive.
I'm living forever, Jerry. I'm just saying I'm living forever. I'm not going to die.
I did have one client who said, you know how people say you can't take it with you? Well, until I can figure out how to take it with me, I ain't going.
I like that, actually. That's pretty good. Let's talk about what you do.
Sure. Well, you know, estate planning doesn't have to be a scary thing. You know, all of us want to protect our loved ones.
Right.
People talk about, oh, the probability of going into a nursing home is this, or the probability of that. Well, we have a 100% probability, unfortunately, of passing away
we are going to pass away. Right.
So we just don't know when. So the whole idea is to get it done as soon as possible and protect your loved ones.
Right.
Now, I in addition to doing probate, I also do I do probate, estate planning, and business law. So those are my three primary practices, and I limit it to those because I'm also a certified financial planner and investment advisor. So that's a whole separate business.
Yeah.
But so there's a limited amount of time available.
But you understand both sides of it,
Yes.
which makes it better for your client.
Exactly.
Because you're like, well, we're gonna get you here, but to get you here, I'm gonna protect this over there.
Exactly.
Right.
So the point is, as long as we know that this unfortunate event is eventually going to happen to us, we want to protect our loved ones.
Right.
Now, most people who call me, first of all, only about 30% of the people ever get around to actually even doing a will. So if you don't do that, the law writes one for you. That's known as the intestacy statutes, and you might not necessarily like what they provide. For example, if you're married, no children, very clear, even without a will, your wife inherits everything.
Right.
If you have children of that marriage, the wife still inherits everything. But if you have, say, children from a previous marriage, now your wife only gets half and the children get half.
Well, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. And so there are all sorts of permutations and combinations that most people aren't aware of. So a simple will is what people usually call me about. But when I start inquiring, my job is to figure out what can go wrong with what you're trying to accomplish.
Right.
So while most people want to do a simple will, you know, I leave giving everything to my wife and then my kids, and they think they're done. Well, the problem is, if you're leaving it to your children, are the children minors? If they're minors, if they're under 18, they cannot legally inherit property. So now you have to open up a guardianship for the kids, and then they inherit everything at 18. Do you want an 18-year-old to come into a big chunk of money?
No.
Most people say no.
No.
Yeah, and similarly, if, God forbid, one of your children pass away before you, leaving children of their own, you want to protect the grandchildren as well.
Yeah.
So in many cases, a revocable living trust really is the best way to go. Similarly, if you own a house, you cannot name a beneficiary on a house. So say you and your wife own a house together, and you're killed in a car crash. One of you is killed and the other lingers for a few days. Well, the survivor definitely does inherit the house, but now the house goes through probate. Probate is expensive. My minimum fee in a probate estate is $5,000, and it goes up from there. And it takes 6 months to a year, whereas with a revocable living trust, it can be done extremely fast.
Wow.
Yeah. So a trust is a very powerful thing, and it has hidden benefits as well. Say you are the person who's created the trust. You're known as the trustor or the grantor or the settlor. There are a lot of different names for it. But if you become incapacitated, you're not capable of handling your own financial affairs, whoever is your successor trustee can step into your shoes and take over for you without the necessity of a guardianship being filed for you. And again, similarly, when you're talking with your kids or your grandkids, you can delay when they come into their money. Like when I did my trust, my kids were 8 and 5. They're in their 30s now. But I was just recently out of a divorce, friendly divorce. I trust my former wife completely with my kids. and their finances, but I wanted to protect the children from themselves. So what it provided is that my children would get an income from the trust until they're 40.
Ooh.
Now, the trustee does have the discretion to dip into the trust for what we call HEMS, for reasons of health, education, maintenance, and support. Health is pretty clear. If they need a medical procedure, they can use the principle of the trust. Same thing for going to college or getting a master's degree. Maintenance and support is a little bit more nebulous, but it basically means that we want the trustee to be able to give the kids extra money if they need it. We don't want the kids thrown on the street just because they can't afford to pay rent.
Right.
And then in my trust, it provided they could put 10% down on a house. They can buy a reasonably priced automobile. Reasonable is determined by the trustee, not the child. Otherwise, my kids would want a Maserati. But beyond that, some people provide that they'll get, say, $10,000 if they get married, or some sort of reward for graduating college. You can put in all sorts of reward situations as long as it's not illegal.
Right.
But beyond that, they would get the chunk of the money, the big chunk. They would get a third when they turn 30. They get half of what's left at 35, and then the balance at 40. So now I have protected the kids from themselves. Say they get married to the wrong person, they've inherited 1/3 of it, they get a divorce, they're wiped out. Okay, they got another chunk of money coming. Now they start a business, that fails. They have one last chance to get it right.
That's smart. I think that's isn't that the golden age? 30 is like all of a sudden we become a little smarter.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah, and it's until you're 30 you're like, what was I thinking?
I don't know. I think I was 40 when I was 25. I bought my first condo when I was 25.
Okay.
I've always been pretty responsible. But I love my kids. They're trying, but they still don't quite get it financially. I love you. I'm sorry. But I do try to protect them, and I'm there for them.
So let's talk about, I know there's something else. You have a book.
Yes, about 10 years ago, I hydroplaned into a tree at 70 miles an hour. Thank you for letting me walk away from it.
Right.
The car was totaled. I was down in Bradenton, so while I'm standing by the side of I-75 in the pouring rain, waiting for a friend to come get me from Tampa, I'm thinking, okay, that could have been it. I am an estate planning attorney, so I've had my documents done for over 20 years now. But what about everything else? My brother, I wasn't married at the time, so my brother was my successor trustee. He doesn't know anything about my life down here. He's in Chicago, I'm in Tampa. So I'm thinking, okay, what if I was in a coma? He doesn't know who my doctors are, what medications I'm on, what I'm allergic to. I have 2 businesses, so I have employees, I have landlords. I have 30 different bills that are automatically paid out of 3 different banking accounts or charged to 3 different credit cards.
And if someone doesn't know that.
Yes. So I think of all the things that you might want to know. So I figured if Mr. Anal Retentive doesn't have all of this stuff written down, probably most of my clients don't either. And sometimes it's just a matter of giving them a guide. So it took 7 years, but I actually wrote a book. It's called My Everything File. It's available on Amazon, but it's also available at www.myeverythingfile.com. And it provides 330 pages just of scenarios of things that your loved ones may need to know about you if something happens to you. And it's not just about the stuff. It's not about your assets and your debts, your insurance, things like that. There's a whole section on creating a family legacy. You know, my father passed away when he was 100 years old. He's my hero. He loved being a lawyer. He practiced law till he was 96.
Wow.
So my book is actually dedicated to him.
Nice.
But what I learned from him is if nobody writes down the stories, what happens to your family history? So here he was 100 years old. He was the last surviving member of his entire generation in my family.
Wow.
And so if he hadn't told us stories about his parents and grandparents, they grew up in Russia. My dad was born here in the US. Those stories are gone forever. So there's a whole section on helping you to create a legacy where you're interviewing the elders of your family, finding out about their parents, bringing it down to your generation, and then just creating something that could be passed down through the generations. I just love the idea that maybe it's ego, but I would love my great grandkids to know that I love performing on stage in Broadway musicals and ballroom dancing with my wife.
That's awesome. So now, can people go to your website and find this as well?
There is a link to it, but
Excellent.
It's $29.95. If you let me do your estate plan, it's free to my clients.
There you go. So hey, look, if it's that time, we all going to die. We're all going to pass away sometime. You need to get it all done right? Call Jerry. Stick around. We have another interview coming up. We'll be right back after these messages.
Thank you so much.